the biggest unmistakable road sign, neon sign that this accident presented was, you are not a thinking head. Truly, let me unlearn all of what I've learned about the gold stars and the effort and the nothing happens without hard work and all the East Coast puritanical values that I swallowed wholesale and lived by for so long. Yeah, I just think as soon as you try to end, you're not learning anymore, and you're in this kind of false comfort, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We collectively don't look at white space, is to leverage those connections so that each object has more ripple.
Wow. Hey everyone, do me a quick favor and double check that you are a follower or subscriber wherever you listen to the show. I'd be unconditionally grateful. Every new follower, listener, and subscriber helps us keep creating content we love and that you enjoy. It's the best way to ensure you never miss one of my conversations. You are on this journey with us, and thank you for that. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Conversations podcast. I am your host, Dr. Alison, and today is going to be, I think, a little bit of a mind-blowing episode because it certainly has stayed in my mind for quite some time. And I want to welcome to the show Nell Derick Debevoise Dewey. She actually is the founder of Nell 3D, which obviously by the name, that's almost self-explanatory. But she is a subtraction activist, which I cannot wait to get into that, a leadership strategist, which you and I share a lot in common around that, and a Forbes leadership contributor. Nell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allison. It's fun to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm excited because, one, you and I didn't know each other, but I think instantly we just made just a really beautiful connection. And what you're doing around leadership is one thing, but I think also what you're doing within the human mind to have us look about how we're sort of functioning, not only in our personal life, but also in our professional life around subtraction. I mean, some people are going to be like, oh, she must be a mathematician. No, it may have a bit of that, but it's not. So we will definitely explore really what that is, because I find it to be fascinating on how you have taken your journey, and this is where now you are focusing not only a book that's going to be coming out soon that we'll definitely talk about, but also how you have framed your business and helping leaders, which I think is extremely interesting to me. So again, Nell, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here. You had me at I was like, oh yes, let's everything.
And did your mind just keep going and going?
Yeah,
and that's why I wanted to ask you before we started, are we sure we're on these? And you're like, yes, I love the N words that you've chosen for the podcast today. Well, let's first talk about your process. What was your process like? We touched on it a bit, but it's been a little bit of time since you and I spoke. So I'm curious to know if more things have evolved as you were sort of reflecting on your own words.
Yes and no. I think from the first time that we talked, when I kind of came across the podcast and you and your work and your background, I had some unwords, one of which I know is the same. I don't want to spoil it because we'll get into them. But I'm pretty sure the other two changed. I kind of lost track of them in between those two conversations, honestly. But now it's been a minute, right? Because I know we had to reschedule. Anyway, it's been a minute since we set these. And so when I was going through my notes, on Monday, looking at the week, and then this morning, looking at today, I was like, yeah, no, those feel spot on, super right. And as you said, we share a lot. There's a lot of ways that our work talks to each other or overlaps, I think. And the
Yes.
unness really was totally magnetic to me because I'm always unning. Subtraction is a version, a flavor of unning. And so I think I could probably have a blast with maybe that'll be a fun challenge for our next episode. Like, give me any word and I'll try to un it in a logical, coherent way.
That's really interesting that you just said that, because I did not make that connection that an un was sort of a subtraction. But it's interesting though, because some guests that I've had on, I guess it could be where they've used a word where it may have a negative presence to them. And then over time, that's turned into something really powerful and strong for them. But I feel maybe with you sort of bringing that back to the forefront, and thank you, because my journey was taking the un that had a negative, and through my journey, and that's why I've said my unwords that I probably had when I first started the podcast, rebranding my business, are definitely different words than they are probably maybe even 6 months ago, and maybe even in today. And I think that's really the beauty part of the unword effect. But I found that was interesting that you use the word subtraction to go with the un, because I myself I didn't think about it from that perspective. So
Totally.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, so my practice, I write and think about like the core of what subtraction is, and there's a method for it, and that's part of my work. But and that's kind of the book and the background and the theory. But then my Substack day to day, what I'm doing is like each month I have a theme, and so power or wealth or bias or love, right? These kind of like big concepts, and we subtract and figure out like what is to take away to let those concepts shine, because like even bias is not inherently a bad thing. It can get nasty when we use it in negative ways against other people or against ourselves, but it's not inherently bad. Anyway, and so when I was thinking about this, I think, to get really language deep here, un versus like a dis or a miss. I think a lot of times we're modifying these elements of our lives, our love or our work or our money or our power, in those like active ways, like adding, like we're dis-doing it, we're misdoing it wrong. Whereas un is just like clearing it out, removing it.
Yeah,
so anyway, I love it.
No, I think that's great. And I'm going to hire you now on as my part of my marketing team, because I think you've even said that more eloquently than I've been able to do myself. So thank you. I appreciate that. But I think I think this is a perfect way to transition into your first word, because I don't think you could have gotten to this level of clarity if it probably wasn't for your first word. And that was unlearning.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's interesting because, usually when I give someone the first word, that they sort of pause, and then I have to go, okay, remember that was your first word. But I think for you, that pause is because it's a very, very big word for you.
Yeah. I am like a pretty aggressive learner. Like I have 5 pretty major degrees, the student loans to prove it. Like I'm like a learner.
Yes.
And I have had to unlearn a lot. And I'm still unlearning a lot. On so many levels, in so many domains of my life and my work. And, I think there's 2 ways that I can see that. And I think in one hand, unlearning is just a form of learning, kind of, right? Arguably, it's like learning a new thing.
On a surface level. I mean, that's a pretty surface level. Would you agree?
I think it's a little, I think it's a little bit of a lazy version, I guess is what I would say, right? Because like the dis and the miss prefixes versus the un, we're now like piling something new on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so versus actually truly unlearning, which leaves a bit of a vacuum. And we know that nature doesn't love a vacuum. So we pile on. Overachievers and gold star junkies don't love a vacuum. Humans, modern Western capitalist humans, don't love uncertainty, which is what unlearning leaves behind. And so there's an unfamiliarity, spoiler alert, an uncomfort in that gap of knowledge or that.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe the most comforting thing in my learning how to unlearn and then unlearning actual things, which we can get more specific and grounded about because I know we want to be a little practical. I think ultimately the best tool for it has been faith.
Wow.
And a connection to up and down spirit, earth, and nature. Like not just in a God spirit kind of way, though that's definitely important for me, but also just in a remembering. I was just out in the only old growth forest in our city, which has been protected and is stewarded now by the Land Trust. And so it's like 200 or 300-year-old forest rather than 40 to 60, which most of town is. We have a lot of green space, which is great, but not old.
Yes.
And so it's just looking around and remembering that, like, yeah, there's a really bad beach epidemic, beech tree disease going around. And so the beech trees are really suffering and probably kind of on their way out here. But the forest is figuring it out, you know, and so that's a loss, but it's a 200-year-old forest that knows how to figure it out. And so oak trees are popping up and these cool chestnut oaks, I don't know, some cool other trees, whatever, not my day job, but you know, just remembering that in that vacuum is this phenomenally deep natural wisdom that doesn't need me or anyone else to like bring a textbook and tell it how to repopulate itself.
Let me ask you this, because there's kind of almost I sometimes can look at the unlearning and tell me if this sort of fits with you and if maybe there's an example around that. But I sometimes I think you have to have an awareness. That awareness has to present itself, which could be that, oh shit awareness. Like, oh, wow, okay. And then there becomes the unlearning process.
Yeah.
So when you were sort of talking about that, it made me think that I think you have to be aware of something, truly aware of something.
Yeah.
Either that's happening in your personal or a combination or just life in general. But that awareness, I think, has to sort of rear its head a bit before the unlearning can happen. Would you sort of agree with that in some, all, maybe some not? And then, because I think the unlearning really kind of touches on a bit of your journey.
Yeah.
Because that's what's making me think about this awareness a bit.
Yeah. Yes, I deeply agree. I think, again, we can get away with that, like, learning something new and piling on version of unlearning.
Yes.
And until something really happens. And so in my case, I'll share an example that I think maybe you're thinking of, which is that it was a few summers ago and I was really along my way on this journey, right? I've had kind of a clear sense of purpose since I was 12, pursued it in a few different ways over a few decades of work, both of which were really aligned in the moment. And then things happened and shifted. And so at this point, 2 summers ago, I was really clear. I'd closed a company, which felt like a really big subtraction. And I was unlearning that identity as a CEO and that companies are the way to build things and this, you know, all of that. and really proud of myself and in it, and speaking and writing and feeling so aligned that that was my highest and best use. Had this great step family that was really blooming in a beautiful way. And so I was just on top of the world. Quite literally, I was 2 or 3 days back from Italy for retreat. So it's full of gelato and like all the things that Italy brings us,
Yes.
Like I was doing awesome. I was like in flow and very busy. It was August, so fall is coming. Always super hectic for me. Speaking events. We had a family wedding that I was helping to plan. My father-in-law was pretty quickly declining. Like there was a lot going on. So
Sure.
I'm driving and I'm in my head, what's the list? I'm rehearsing. I'm optimizing the day minute by minute, right? Oh, right. I can, while I'm making my sandwich, I'll call the AC repair, right? This is the level that, and I'm like, I'm such a badass. Like I'm functioning. I'm in purpose. I'm in like, yes. And in this, I drift out of my lane and go head on into a 20-ton landscaping truck. That is not a fight you want to pick.
No.
I was luckily in quite a robust German, mini SUV, so I was okay, and we were all okay. Car was totaled, but somehow we all walked away, the people in the other car, me. And so, Alison, that was maybe of the variety that you're talking about of an impact of an event that is like, this cute little like reframe that you've been doing that you thought was so revolutionary and impressive. And this alignment that you've found, that is the 3D. We can talk about that at some point, but that's Nell 3D,
Yes.
is this me, we world, multidimensional version of life that I had really pursued and gotten to.
Definitely. Now, let me ask you a question, because at this moment, someone could be like, hey, you know what? This was an accident. It was horrible, right? But once you were able to get to a place after chaoticness, what was that experience like for you where this wasn't just for you, just an accident? Because I don't want someone to listen and just go, oh my God, that was horrible, right? Because usually when something happens, we go, okay, we'll make sure we pay attention better, whatever, and we rationalize all those things. But this experience for you was really a catalyst that got you to think deeper. It wasn't just, and I loved when I was kind of looking back on our conversation, you were like, yes, that was the accident, and of course that was horrible, and thank God everyone is okay. But you then took some time after that to reflect and go, no, this is life-changing. This accident spoke to me on so many different levels of change that I needed to do. Can you talk a bit about how you were sort of talking to yourself sort of about that with that transition?
Yeah. And maybe this is one of the biggest, or certainly a fundamental unlearning, was exactly that, like talking to myself, thinking about it, reflecting, like many of, I'm sure your audience, certainly mine, we are thinkers, we are intellectual beings, we work it out, right? We're rewarded for doing that. And what a gift to have that cognitive talent and ability and training. The biggest unmistakable road sign, neon sign that this accident presented was, you are not a thinking head. You are a physical body moving through the world that has impact and has vulnerability.
Wow. What was that for you to be able to put it in those words to yourself?
A few things. One, the impact on other people. Who knows? I don't know what the, forensics would say or whatever. Arguably, there's certainly a version in which I could have died. And that's intense.
Yes.
And there's a whole narrative there that has also been very powerful and ultimately really a gift for me, for sure. The other is I could have killed somebody. And that is really heavy to me.
I couldn't imagine.
And so, as this kind of heady person walking through the world thinking about, since I was 12, what an impact I want to make on other humans. And now my level of distraction means that I could have killed somebody.
Yeah, that had to have been a gun punch. For you to say that to yourself, that had to have been a gun punch.
That's no joke.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely.
so that, if nothing else, raises the stakes of everything I've been saying and teaching and
Yes.
writing and speaking about alignment and purpose and impact. But also the way in which we do all that, balance or meditate, mindfulness, exercise, good eating, dog walks, nature, my horse time, like all these things that I do so religiously and a little bit self-righteously, if I'm being honest, actually were piling on so much that I could have killed somebody.
Wow. And I would have to say, and now your vulnerability and talking about this, I am extremely grateful because I think people honestly need to really hear this, and with how much we take on. And I'm just thinking, and not to rush us through, but I think in going into your second word is really a good time to do that, because and that's uncomfortable. And the reason why I think this is a great segue to go into that word was you could be in this moment, and again, I am not in your head, and I'd like to see if this sort of fits into maybe where you would go with this. But this is a time either you could sit with that uncomfortability, which is I've been in this place for other things, and it is so uncomfortable. It is so unbearable. But the reward out of it can be really great. But this was kind of a moment, I think possibly for you, where you could really sit in that uncomfortability, and I would certainly like to talk about that. Or you can do what a lot of people could do at this time and rationalize it. This happened for maybe this reason, but you really, in my opinion, and in talking with you, you really went to that uncomfortable place. So please talk about the word, and if I'm somewhat on the track with you in regards to that word.
Totally right. And I think it actually helps me make a link that I hadn't made before, the way you drew it out, which is, I talk about that time after the accident, as well as a bunch of other things in my life. But I think resilience is a little bit problematic in some ways, and we're hearing a lot, right? There's a lot of conversation about that. I think
Sure.
it's not a cancel culture, like let's get rid of it, but I just think some of the ways that we're maybe overusing it or distorting it are problematic. And I really like to think about, and in retrospect, I think I have practiced pro-zilliance, right? To keep playing with prefixes. And I
Yes.
think I hadn't made that connection, but I think your point about the difference there, whether you're going to be resilient and bounce back to what was comfortable,
Yes. Yes.
or have something happen, collision or otherwise, major or minor, be in the discomfort of it long enough to move forward and be prosilient, coming out as a better human or leader or whatever on the other side, rather than that resilience, return to comfort, get back in the wheel and drive more safely.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you, because I think by sitting there, I mean, what was sort of going through my mind is this could also be another time, and I was very good at this, very good. And self-critical, beating up on myself about, and I'm not saying that some of that didn't go on for you, you know, in pertaining to the accident, but being able to sit in that comfortable and really, not spend the time and beating yourself up about something that you couldn't change. It happened.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that can change from that particular moment.
Yeah.
But I think with the uncomfortable is how we decide to really sit with it, be uncomfortable, and see how we can truly move forward
Yeah.
without minimally trying to beat ourselves up about it to where then kind of what you said, going back to that comfortable place.
Yeah, totally. And I kept them in this order because I know for myself, through over the course of my career, having worked internationally in pretty intense kind of frontline, refugee situations and other challenging contexts, I had unlearned that comfort is a necessity, or I had kind of unlearned the urgency of comfort. I had come to accept the fact that life is uncomfortable sometimes, and that's part of the story, maybe a source of growth, or just hard.
Yeah.
For a time or for a chapter or, but not to be brushed under the rug, rushed through, or feared even. And so that sequence is really important, I think, to getting to the uncomfortable. And I don't even quite like comfortable with uncomfortable. It's just like present with uncomfortable.
I agree, because I think we're constantly, or I hope, I think you're unlearning and being uncomfortable. I think those kind of go back and forth. And I think those can both have a very positive to it, because something that you're unlearning can cause it to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. So I think that's really an excellent point. Let's talk about your unending.
Yeah.
Because this word I found to be interesting, and I mentioned to you that I had the way you described it was very different and eye-opening for me, because I never really looked at it, this word, in kind of this way. So others have used it in a little bit of a different context. And so what was it about this word? Because when we were going over the order, you pretty much were saying to me, well, unending has to be last. I mean, like, of course. So let's talk about unending.
Yeah. Well, and you made such the perfect segue, right? Of like the unlearning and uncomfortable just go back and forth in an unending cycle of forever. So that's the system that we're playing with. But yeah, unending is letting go. God, I want to reference this guy that I got to see speak. I heard him on a podcast, which I can share for listener notes if you want. And then I got to see him live at this conference a few weeks ago in Athens. I didn't know he was going to be there, and he closed the whole thing out. And he closed with this phenomenally skilled, first of all, as an orator. He's just brilliant and so good, but also fascinating and inspiring conversation about completion. And kind of the violence of completion. And he had all these, he brought us from we were in Athens, so the dawning of democracy through Christianity, through the industrial age, colonialism, the industrial age, certainly now AI, the nuclear era, all these versions of completion and knowing things, completion, finishing as violence. Because they don't allow for the unknowing and the honest point that nothing, again, to go back to nature, totally false to say that anything ends. When the tree falls, it becomes a nurse log on which moss and saplings and fungi grow and launch the whole next generation of the forest, right? There's no ending. And so I think when we think about like, a project concludes, but if that project doesn't give life to something else, whether it's a learning, something you take into a next project, or the hire that hiring process, whatever, if that doesn't do anything, should you have done the project? Like, I think,
Right.
and
Right.
yet we have this human, or again, maybe this Western capitalist kind of masculine wanting to like tie up loose ends, put a bow on it, ship
Yes.
it. There's all this language that pushes us to completion or end. And I think it's a lot less fun, first of all, because you kind of shut down curiosity and possibility. But this Bayo Akomolafe is the speaker who I'm referencing, and again, we'll share his details, to point out that there's like a violence to that was just really helpful, and again, kind of lifting the urgency of this conversation. So yeah, I just think as soon as you try to end, you're not learning anymore, and you're in this kind of false comfort waiting for the other shoe to drop, because we all know that that's the natural cycle, that everything keeps going, but we have forgotten or learned that it's not, that we need to have tight cycles and deadlines.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. The word that I wanted to bring up that goes with your unending is my athletes and coaches have used the word unfinished. That they have felt. So of course they're going to have a sports analogy to it. But when one of my leaders mentioned unfinished, that really has seemed to be a theme with those individuals I've had on the show, where they may have needed to leave their sport, and what that journey was like for them. And some did find it at first to feel ending, without a doubt, because of everything that they have done. Either they started being an athlete at the age of 6 to, who knows, but it's consumed their whole world. And so, but where we've talked about almost kind of that unlearning, where they had to get comfortable being out of their sport, and kind of that identity that you were talking about, even from you being a CEO and selling your company, and like what did that now mean? I mean, who am I now? And so it's been really inspiring for me, hearing leaders come on the show and really say that how we've been looking at things in such a compartmental viewpoint, where this unending and unfinished, it really has opened my eyes to it, because there was a time I was thinking very much like that, because we do look at things as human beings as a start to finish, and then there's no room for reflection,
Right.
or more time to unlearn.
Right. I think it also shuts down, there's no room for reflection, there's no room for generosity.
Yes.
If you think about like the indigenous wisdom of 7 generations, right? Or even from what I understand of the Chinese kind of political process of planning for, multiple generations forward. If you're working on like your life and your legacy, right? Legacy, okay, trails forward, but still it's kind of yours, and you finish it on a certain day when we all know we head out to wherever you might believe we head out to. And that's kind of an inevitable and real end. But if you conceive of it in that way, what is your incentive to steward the forest in my town, or the intellectual property that you're creating, or the organization that you're building and the supply chain behind it for a long term, right? If it's about a project or a quarterly basis or your 45-year career, that's nothing in the span of time. And so if you're looking at the finish line, I think that is very ungenerous also.
Yeah, I think I think that is an absolute beautiful way to sort of kind of wrap up on how you really feel about the unending, because I think that's just a beautiful way to kind of bring home that word, because I myself have never really thought about it from that perspective. And so I think even the way that that you have sort of framed worked not only that word, but I think the unlearning, the uncomfortable, and the unending part, I think really speaks to, and I think this is a good transition point, because I would love for you to talk about how you became a subtraction activist, because I think this is going to really get into a lot of the meat that I think the listeners and viewers are going to be like, oh my God, this sounds fascinating. My question, though, and I want to make sure that I read this. I've seen this in your emails, and I also saw this in the bio that you sent to me. And this says, what if I could do less in the most powerful thing I could do? Was this a question was this one of the questions, or the pinnacle question of how being a subtraction activist evolved for you?
That was ultimately the unlearning after the accident. Was like, okay, I'm talking about mindfulness and more presence and don't hustle. All the hustle is out there. Running a company in New York for 10 years, like that was the culture. Even though I said I didn't want to be part of that, I was more conscious. And yet, right? And so the accident was like, okay, if that risks harming other humans, I'm still doing something wrong. And so truly, let me unlearn all of what I've learned about the gold stars and the effort and the nothing happens without hard work and all the East Coast puritanical values that I swallowed wholesale and lived by for so long. And what if the most powerful thing I could do is do less? And with that lens, I looked at my own life first, right? And considered that. And was like, what would it have to mean for me not to be putting lives at risk in traffic? Just as a literal start.
Now, I have a question here. When we say less, and this is not to pick apart this word, but how did you define less as being? And was there a way that not only from the word, but were you thinking about actual things in your life, tangible things, or maybe emotional things? I'll have you answer the question that define that word less.
Yeah. So yes, and, right? This is not like Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, which is a fabulously creative and effective and powerful thing for people who want to create that version of a life, right? Great. The people, me and the people that I'm working with that this has served are ambitious and big-hearted and want to make a dent in the universe, right? Like, we're here to make things better and to not kill ourselves or anyone else doing it, literally or figuratively, and to have a family of whatever we want that to look like, chosen or blood or otherwise, and make that impact on the world and be sane. And maybe even thriving, right? Probably even at least most days thriving. So it's a great question. And this is not a simple kind of it's not minimalism, right? Like, look at my background, look at my life. Like, I'm not a minimalist. That's not what's happening.
Right.
It's so here, what we have to get into that I know we've talked about a little and your people can handle is a little systems thinking. So it's a whole school of thought. I can break down pretty simply, and people can and should go deeper if they want in the rabbit hole. But any system, which is like our body, our organization, a forest, our industry, our country, right? Like, these are all systems. They're not lines. That is an unlearning that we all have to do. It's not the neat assembly line if then that we might have learned as the career ladder or, some of these things. False. So once we come back to this reality, we remember, oh, right, I'm a system. My life is a system. We know that there are three elements of a system. There are objects, right? The items. And so we can think of that, to your point, of like things on our calendar that we can choose to change or add or subtract. Then there's the purpose of the system, right? What's the function of this system, of my body to get through the day and be strong and healthy, whatever, of my company to make widgets with responsible materials that serve clients, right? Whatever, we have a function. And so purpose is a thing that people talk about and work on rightly. A lot of my work has been around that. The third the element of a system is the interconnections between the objects. And these are kind of invisible, usually. They're often, to your point, kind of like energetic or even emotional or maybe cognitive, right? They're the connections we make between breakfast and the commute and the meeting and the deck we have to do and the presentation and the tense customer call and shopping for dinner and picking, right? Like these are all the items. And again, we may need to outsource dinner or the deck, or we can play with that. But what I've found is that the low-hanging fruit, because I wasn't really looking at it, and scientifically there's great research actually from systems thinking that we collectively don't look at white space, is to leverage those connections so that each object has more ripple.
Wow.
And that allows us to actually do less and yet achieve more of the impact we care about.
Okay. So I love this. So the subtraction is those, would you say the subtraction is in that scenario, those little emotional things that we might be able to put off to something else? Like how crucial really is that? Would that be a fair statement to say?
It's all that static in those connections, right? So instead of thinking like breakfast fuels me and makes me not cranky so I can get to my first meeting clear, we think breakfast takes too much time. I probably shouldn't eat those calories. I don't know if protein is right or enough. My kids are cranky and so I'm pissed off. I don't want to sit down with them and have breakfast, right? There's all this static around breakfast rather than a clear breakfast to meeting, to workout, to who I'm buying breakfast from and my economic impact. Clear connections to these things that we want to happen in the day. And so now we're having breakfast and it's causing these ripples that are aligned with the impact we want to have, rather than allowing for that static and noise.
Okay, so I have a question, and I was only looking down for a reason because there's two things that I thought were really interesting, and I don't know if one fits here. So if it doesn't, that's okay.
Yep.
And one was called the me, we world. Does that fit in this scenario, or is that and the systematic subtraction?
Yeah.
And then there was another one that I thought was interesting where you said stop, drop, and roll method for cutting out what no longer serves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
all of that fits.
Okay. So all that fits. Okay. Yeah. Because before we dive into those two big things, because I think these are practical things that I think we can talk about and have people really begin to think about this.
Yep.
But one clarification I would like to make, because someone's going to listen and go, okay, this sounds like a time management episode to me. So I'm going to hit stop because I've already been trained on time management, cutting the things out. So could you first explain why this is not a time management episode and why this is on a higher level of thought that can really impact much deeper areas of our life than just a time management conversation?
Yeah. It's an energy management conversation which is exponentially more powerful than time management. Time management's not invalid, right? It's an important thing that we all come through and can be part of the toolbox. But not all time is created equal in physics, right? Like Einstein discovered that it's quantum. It's not, it moves in lines and waves. And so, and then just as humans, again, we know, we might have been told that like, there's only so many hours in the day, right? We have these little quips. But if we're being honest, you know, an hour that you've spent, on a bad date feels a lot longer than an hour that you've spent with friends or the love of your life on a beach, or at work, an hour that you spend in this nightmare meeting with a dysfunctional team or a combative client feels a lot longer than 60 minutes where you're in flow, visualizing, collaborating, brainstorming, whatever you're writing alone in a spreadsheet, doing formulas and models, and that is flow and you're like ecstatic, right? So time is not created equal. So great to manage it, but this takes it up a notch. I thought there was one more thing I wanted to say about time management. And okay, there's a whole little rabbit hole, but I feel like I'm going to drop it because again, I think you and the audience can handle it.
Yeah. That's okay.
And that is that very specifically, if we are thinking about time, there's chronos time, which is 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. And so again, that goes to time management, and that's great. Kairos is another notion of time, which is the time it takes. Sometimes this is quick when things are ripe and ready, and you're like, oh my gosh, they just said yes. Like we didn't do the negotiation. We didn't do 7 calls. They just said, yep, I want it. How much? And then other times when you met somebody at a conference 7 years ago, and then they call, and then they cancel 4 meetings, and then they show up, and then they get replaced, and you start a new relationship. And now 9 years later, you've got this great contract. And that's the time it takes. Right. So, but Kairos is a really helpful thing because in nature and in systems, we can't always Gantt chart the days and the hours that it's going to take. It takes the time it's going to take. And that's especially true in this world of quantum computing and interconnection and AI, right? Speeds are so much faster. And yet there are human realities and tariffs and geopolitical conflicts and all kinds of things that change that. So that's my 20 cents about time.
Yeah, I'm happy that you explained that because even though there will be people that understand energy, and then there's people that don't really understand energy, and I've had many leaders that have come on who are either truly in the space of energy, like that really is their profession, very where you have taken yours, or they understand the concept of what energy is. So let's take the person that is like, I've been hearing about this energy thing. I don't know if I buy into this energy thing. Yeah. So out of the 2 things that I mentioned earlier, where someone would begin to think about subtraction in this energy way that you're talking about, would this be more of the stop, drop, and roll part? Or does that fit in with the me world dimensions?
So kind of 3 meta steps, and we've been talking about like the philosophy of it, right? And so the first step is a simple binary choice to say, I recognize that I'm a system. I recognize that I cannot improve anything if there's not available capacity, is another word for energy that might be more comfortable or familiar to folks working in a corporate context, right? We have capacity, like on the assembly line, in our teams, in our heads, on our calendars, there's capacity. And if there's not available capacity, we can't improve anything.
And I love you said that, because I think that's the first step that someone that goes again now to the awareness.
Yes.
And I would probably say I was a late bloomer in the awareness of that. And I think that's just because how business was done, or people that I've seen who I wanted to achieve what they've achieved, and because you think that's what you need to achieve too. So I'm happy that you talked about it from that. So you at least first have to be aware that there's capacity.
Right. You've got to be aware that you need capacity, and then you have to get honest about your capacity, right? And so that's my activism.
Love it.
Is
I
like
love that.
inviting people to just make that shift, because you know what? We are sandwiched between piles of legacy systems and habits that were very smart at one point and no longer serve, and an onslaught of new generated tools and opportunities and information from AI and quantum computing and everything else that's coming from the future. And if we don't realize that we got to make some capacity and learn how to do it, we're drowning. We're done. As a leader, as a professional, as a human, we are done.
I love that. Okay, before we move on to the next stage, because I love how we're breaking this down, what is something right now someone can do in a leadership role in your life? Because I don't think it really matters in what capacity, a position or life someone is in. I think this is a basic, and I don't use basic as, because I think this is a huge step. I think this is a huge step.
Yeah.
Because you have to have awareness before you can even move forward on anything, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What is something that someone can do to get a glimpse of awareness to be able to start thinking about subtraction?
I really invite people to look in the mirror or close your eyes, but like get out of the external world for 60 seconds and ask if you're living the life you want to be living. Mm-hmm. Like, had my car accident gone differently, was I okay with how it would have ended? And all things considered, I can say, and again, that's a whole separate, but yes. And then with that information, no, starting that afternoon, I realized that I was still way too externally focused and being pulled by all these metrics that were not mine, that were not aligned with my values, and putting people at risk as a consequence, and not valorizing my genius and my core work that is mine to do, because I was doing all this other work, whether literal or emotional or energetic. And so just be okay in 60 seconds or 10 minutes or a week of discomfort to honestly check in, like, are these bags huge? Am I falling asleep at dinner with my friends? Mm-hmm. Am I always nauseous? Is my heart always racing? Is my hair falling out? Has come up for a bunch of corporate women I've been talking to and working with lately.
Right.
What, right? Like, physical body, we are embodied. How is it actually going? And if after that honesty, without shaming yourself, no noise, no guilt, it is the best life that you can imagine, good for you.
Exactly.
Come back in 3 months and ask again, good for you.
Yep.
For most smart, big-hearted, ambitious people I know who want so badly to fix the world, we are overextended, and that means that we're leaking some energy that takes away from what is ours to do, and to the wholeness that is ours to be, to feel, to thrive enough to do this marathon. And so that it's really, that's the first step. We'll get to the kind of practical and the tactical, because that's absolutely there. But it's irrelevant if you haven't truly made this commitment to yourself to retake the agency of driving a life you want to drive. And I don't say that naively. There are bosses, there is health insurance to keep, there are rents to be paid. Like, I get that. And we absolutely have agency to at least recognize that we're not quite living the life that is ours that we want to, and that we want to. And so we're going to move toward that. Not immediately, not by blowing anything up, but we're going to make that commitment. And now we're going to navigate by unlearning through the uncomfort in an unending process of subtraction to get to the best of us.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'm happy that you, really happy that you broke that down, because I really do feel that that is that's almost in anything, and I've talked a lot on my podcast even about my own journey, and the things that I was holding on to for so long, and where I needed to forgive myself for things. And that, so when I say, when I use basic, and I've had leaders who have even talked about, her name is Robin Toft, and she's the CEO of CureBound. And when we were recording her episode, and I said to her, please tell me if I am not saying this, and how you would say it. I certainly didn't want to put words into her mouth. But I'm telling you, it was a gut punch to me when she told me this, and she believes that she gave herself cancer. And when I said it back to her, I said, please tell me if that's not how, and she said, no, you said it exactly how I said it to you. And she went into why she felt that way. And I think that fits very well in this awareness part that we're talking about. Yeah. And she gets into why she felt that way, how she was living her life, how she was eating, how she was doing all these things. Yeah. I believe during that podcast, we obviously talked about subtraction without using it, wanted to save it for you. For your podcast. So once someone has this this awareness, what would be sort of a next stage for someone, just to kind of put this in perspective for them, that we can kind of give them this this journey? Because I think what makes yours so interesting is, we talk about, decluttering, and we talk about, if you just declutter your closet, we have all these things, but they're sort of separated. Yeah. But what I loved about your subtraction methodology is I felt that it had just a really nice process where there's this understanding, and no matter what it is, if it is decluttering or it is what, it still fits into what it is you're talking about, and that's what I really loved about it. So, and without sounding very stage like, well, once you get to this stage then you go to the next, that is certainly, but obviously for the time of our podcast together, which I think you and I are probably going to have to do a part 2 at some point. But what would you feel sort of after that? What would kind of the next phase or stage that someone would go through?
So this is this really beautiful and fun, if you choose to make it so, stop, drop, and roll, right? If we're similar generations, you probably remember fire safety. That was the lesson, right? The axe and the big cool jackets and the hat, and something on your body catches on fire, kids. You stop, you drop to the floor, and you roll around. You don't go get a fire extinguisher, actually, right? And so that's actually very emblematic and accurate, that as gold star junkies, as achievers, as capitalists, as, all the things we are taught and incentivized to add more. Go get a tool, go hire somebody, go learn something new, spend more hours. But actually, once we've kind of made, come to this awareness, made this choice to take our life by the reins and live it how we want to live it, we stop and we gather some data. right? Maybe that already was present in that awareness getting, right? Oh my God, my hair is falling out. This is probably not an okay way to live my life. Something should
Right.
change. Or
Right.
maybe it's I'm losing clients, or I'm losing weight, or I'm gaining weight, or whatever, right? This is macro, micro, but some data about how it's actually going. And then we experiment with letting go of something in order to change that data in a direction that we want to get to, right? So we're also essentially playing with the scientific method here, right? We get a baseline, no shame, no judgment. Where are we at? What might we let go of, not add, not learn, not do
Mm-hmm.
more of? What might we drop to fix the hair, the weight, the sleep, the client load, whatever? And then we roll, which is to say we make hypotheses about the ripples, what might happen based on this subtraction. And we see, right? So quick example to really bring it down to life. I wanted to, board service was a natural kind of next part of my career. So what do? You join some nonprofit boards. So I put some feelers out. I get some great invitations. I join a board. Great. It's kind of a startup. They're like, we actually need a treasurer. I saw you're an MBA. What do you think? I'm like, great. I'll be a treasurer. So now I'm on executive committee, on the board, head of finance committee, membership. I love facilitation. I love community. I'll chair membership. Great. So a year in, Alison, I have 12, maybe not quite, 10 to 12 hours a month of recurring meetings now for this nonprofit board. So love the executive director, love exec committee, fascinating mission. I don't know much about it. It's religion and real estate and how we can bridge. What I know is that creates earned revenue for nonprofits. That's been a lifelong passion of mine. So it's very cool. I'm learning a lot. It's great. A year in, it's not great. I'm fried. I'm resentful. I hate meetings. These meetings are no better. It's a drag. I'm underperforming, right? The sweet vice treasurer, Bill, is basically carrying all the way to finance committee. I'm like, thanks, Bill. Are you sure you don't mind? He's like, nah, I got it. No problem. I'm missing membership committees. Membership is not growing. And I'm like, Kate, I call the executive director who I love. I'm like, Kate, I gotta stop.
Yeah.
I know my term isn't quite over, but this is not in anyone's interest. We gotta let Bill step up. I think,
Yep.
Joan is doing a great job on that. Let's elevate her. Whoa. I got to resign. And Kate's like, okay, or you could just be like a normal board member, not 2 committee chairs and exec committee, and come for 2 hours a quarter and contribute the way you do around facilitation. If you're willing, I love the coaching that we've been doing, because that was part of the 10 to 12 hours was prep for all these meetings, essentially coaching her. So I'm like, oh, that we could do that? She's like, we could do that. There's no rule. Yep.
Yeah.
So year 2, I'm spending 4 hours a quarter, reduced by almost 90%, right? I'm way down. An hour and a half coaching her, an hour and a half of exec committee, an hour of prep to of board, an hour to help prep the board in a way that's really great facilitation and dynamic, so everyone loves it, including me. And all of a sudden, I have 25 hours a quarter back. I'm doing things I love. It's helping her. I'm not resentful and showing up 5 minutes late and cranky and distracted to every meeting. And Bill soars as finance chair. It all works out. So that's kind of the stop was like, whoa. I got to look at this. I can't just drag through another year. The drop was the committees and the officialdom of treasurer. And then the role was, what if I contributed these specific things that I love, I think she loves, and we free these other roles up for somebody else. And it really worked fabulously.
Yeah, there were 2 things I was thinking about when you were talking about it, and that is such a beautiful example. And I think one of the things that really struck out for me in this example, and I think this is something that I think is really hard for women, in this particular, we'll take your example, is I need this, but if I do this, or say I need this, how is someone going to react to me? And then we get stuck in that. So then we can't really go through the effective process of what you're talking about with the subtraction part. And so here, you're basically saying, I don't know if this is for me. And so here's this opportunity that you could have left, and that one could have benefited you. But two, it may not have really, because the parameters of what you were able to do and give, at least this example gave the time to go, wait, I was already putting a parameter on something, and you're telling me it's not an issue. Wow, this can really be great. So I think it was a beautiful example. One, that you were showing the courage to, which we really need to do more of as women. Not really courage, but I think we kind of view it that way. Like, oh, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings because it's something I really truly need, instead of like, hey, I'm bringing this to someone because I really need it. I need you to hear me and listen to me what I'm saying. And then something more wonderful kind of happened from that. So I think that was really a beautiful example. And I think the other thing to take into consideration during this process is to not compare yourself to others during this process, because this is your internal work. This isn't you saying, I need to be at a different stage because someone else got there faster.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a really important part about it, because when we try to do something reflective, I still think we're trying to measure our reflectiveness to someone else's reflectiveness. Like, maybe I needed to get there. You know what I mean? It's this constant thing instead of our own timetable. And so I think that is something to think about when you're going through this process, that it's your journey. It's your own personal. It's your own things that are important to you.
Which is the most generous thing we can do.
Totally.
And so this is very high up on my list of myths that as a subtraction activist, I really would love to bust, especially for the helpers, women and feminine leaders and everyone of any gender or identity or body or sexuality who is looking to leave the world a better place and sees themselves as a steward, informally or formally, is it is not generous to give of yourself till you bleed.
Right.
That isn't generous. That's murderdom, and it ends in zero impact.
Yes.
And so, the best quote that merges those kind of shoulds and then that, like, this is your journey, not comparison, do it your way, is the Howard Thurman, right? Don't ask what the world needs. Don't ask what the world needs. Don't ask what the board needs. Don't ask what the family needs. Mm-hmm. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs, what the board needs, what your family needs is people who have come alive. And
it's interesting you say that, because I've had people, I work with, with very large companies and do a lot of big consulting type projects. And when I started this podcast, I would hear people say to me, oh my God, you're doing such really great work. And I could not make that connection of what that meant. I'm all like, I get to talk to people, like, this is really great. A little bit on my own terms. This is wonderful. But I didn't understand. They were like, and I mean, these are people like, you're really doing great work. You're doing great work. And the world needs more of this. And I'm like, what? Like, it wasn't registering with me. Yeah. But the way that you just described that, I do now, but even the way that you described that made me think about that, was because it does. It makes me come out live. It makes me ask the questions to my leaders, and I'm also learning through this process. So that's the other reason why. I mean, we're both learning from each other. Totally. And you saying earlier in the podcast, like, Oh, thank you for framing it that way. I didn't even think about that. And so that's really the whole beauty part of this. And so it something I think was a big learning lesson for me too is in defining what that is. Like, you're doing really great work. I was like, what? Okay, what does that really mean? But it was because my own definition of what that work had to be, and that is not necessarily the case. So that was hugely impactful of a big bulb that came into my head.
It's such a crucial unlearning right now that, again, all these things, well, that's why they call it work, and they wouldn't pay you if it didn't suck, and right, like all these blurbs that we have.
Totally.
And we kind of are verging away from that, and there's some generational push, and yet it's so normalized, the overwork, the misery of it, and look, again, not naive, like there are things that need to be pushed forward. There are emails, there are hard conversations, there are things that are uncomfortable or difficult or effortful. And because it's joyful or feels easy does not mean that it is not work without value and real impact. And we've got to unlearn that one quick, because
really,
it's literally
quickly.
killing us.
Yeah, really, really quickly. So thank you for summarizing that as well. And I appreciate you allowing me to go through my example, because I wanted to know if that was sort of fitting into kind of what you were talking about. So that's a huge, that's a podcast that we just talked about, and just that alone. But just to sort of frame for our time, what kind of the other parts of this could look like, just to kind of put this in a framework. And of course, we'll have all your wonderful information, because I think what you're doing is incredible. And I think we are probably going to have to do a part 2, you and I, which would be amazing. But please, at least kind of, just so we don't just kind of keep it as that, but where the picture can sort of be formulated for the listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So we've gotten to all of it. There are so many deeper places to go. And so please, I really encourage people to come hang out with me on Substack. I know they have a guest pass to see the whole full package. So please, that's the laboratory. So come play. But, to tie it all together, it's systematic subtraction is what I'm practicing and teaching and sharing. And so there's 2 pieces to that. The first is that you can't solve a systematic problem with force. Right? It's squeezing a square peg into a round hole. Like I
tried
the
it
peg
so
breaks.
many times. You're absolutely correct.
Truth, not my opinion, doesn't work.
Tried it.
And so that's this realizing that we are a system, and just accepting that to be true, and realizing that we cannot muscle this one if we've made that awareness that we want to take our life by the reins and live it for ourselves.
Totally
and then
agree.
The subtraction part is, we can't improve anything if we don't have the available capacity, the available energy. And so we got to subtract.
Yeah.
Which is what we get to through stopping, dropping, and rolling unendingly for the rest of our days, because we're refilling it. Again, we're ambitious. We're not off to the beach a la Tim Ferriss, or to learn Muay Thai, or whatever he's doing with his other hours. We're ambitious, big-hearted, caring people who are trying to make a difference. And so we're clearing the chaff, and new opportunities come. And we're clearing the chaff from those to allow new opportunities and new ways, right? And so it's this constant process of refinement, really. It's distilling, essentially, of the best part. I call it our 1/8 billionth. 8 billion humans on the world. A few of us, 1%, sociopaths, psychopaths, are not going to contribute. So it's 1/700,999,999, whatever. Round up and call it. Our 1/8 billionth is all we have to do. That is like a tiny microscopic proportion, which doesn't make it easy, because it's actually really hard to get to the small specific thing. So that's what we're doing. It's just a constant stop, drop, roll, figure it out, look around, gather the data, make some hypotheses, do some experiments to find exactly that niche of your best aliveness that contributes to the healing of the world, and just do that.
And the other thing I'd probably say is I think you can also have a trusted partner in this. And someone who I feel, if they're of course not working with you or working with me, but we have a tendency to ask people for advice because we know we're going to hear the answer that we're hoping to hear. That's going to justify us not having to get to unlearn or uncomfortable or to end and then go through it. And so for me, I have always sought out as part of my life team, as part of my professional team, that I want to be I want to be challenged in a way that is positive for me, that will make me be uncomfortable, that is going to get me to think in different ways, and that's why even this podcast challenges me, because I didn't even realize today how in depth we would even go and what that means. And to me, what's exciting about that is there is more than the superficial that's being presented to us that is out there. And so that's why I appreciate you going to the depth, because that is part of what I want to bring out into the world collectively, alongside the guests that I have on this show, because sometimes what we're seeing outside, are not the healthiest things, and starting out with ourselves first, and that's why I was saying in the awareness, but then also, not to be so hard on yourself, and one of the greatest gifts that I had to learn was to forgive myself, and even to go through that process. And these things that you're talking about, this isn't something you're going to be able to put a 6-month plan together and be like, okay, great, I'm never going to do this again.
Nope.
This is something that you're going to be able to use in your life, in your business, who you are as a human being. And that is the essence. So much of this show is because there's so many things out there that are showing us that we're machines when we're human beings, made up of all kinds of scientifical things that no one wants to talk about, and made up of emotions and things of that makes us who we are individually. So I appreciate you so much bringing that home, and your subtraction methodology. I just think, and thank you for going down a path where people can begin to do that today. And the awareness, if anyone is getting anything out of the show today, really is that awareness. Because, man, it then gets fun after the awareness. I mean, it really, really does. And I think that's amazing. I did want to ask you this question where you talked about the me, we, and world. Where does that fit into? Because I thought that was I've never heard anyone talk about it in kind of that way.
Yeah.
But where does that sort of fit into the whole methodology for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the clearest, you're a consultant, so MECE, right? Mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Like, that's the cleanest framework for the components of a life that I've seen. Like, the human experience, I think, can be boiled down into that triad.
So does it start with, it starts with you first?
Unending.
In a way?
Unending. It's all a cycle. So
Right.
oxygen mask first, right? If I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
get pushed, yes.
Sure.
And I think we all have really different orientations. I was very world first until I was 30, right? I saw this purpose at 12. I went to nonprofit. I went closer and closer and closer to the source of impact to like make
Yeah.
a difference. And it was
Yes.
motivating. It worked for me-ish until it didn't. And that's where this framework came from. But the idea is that, me being like my collective holistic well-being, my physical
Yeah.
health, my spiritual, all the things. We, being my team, profession, paid or unpaid, right, whatever work looks like, and
Yeah.
family. So personal,
Yes.
professional, we are in that same dimension because if we're being honest, they overlap and interconnect.
Absolutely.
And then world, in that 1/8 billionth way, specific, narrow mine, not shame-based, not saving the Amazon or ending cancer. We cannot do that as single people, but our little piece of it. And so whereas we've been taught that, you kind of study and shape your me and then contribute to your we, build a family, build a career, and then retire and give back because presumably based on that language, you've taken too much is the implication. So now you have to give some back. False. Certainly in this world. And again, generationally, we're seeing a hunger and a remembering of this reality of being a system in a system. And so so that provides, that starts to be that energetic connection between the things, right? When we think about the systems theory, when we get to the role, me, we, world is a really helpful structure, scaffolding to think about that, right? If you're thinking about like my breakfast to my first meeting, like, I don't know, or I don't know what tendrils, what ripples my breakfast might have. Well, go through the triad. For me, it improves my mood, or it regulates my blood sugar, or, I don't know, what are all the me things it does for you? It gives me a minute to sit and eat cereal when I can't touch my phone because I have a spoon in my hand. Like, I don't, what are
Right.
all the me's?
Love
Okay.
it.
What are the we's? Are you doing this with your kids? Are you intentionally not doing this with your kids? Because that makes it chaotic and stressful.
Right.
Right? Like, what are you modeling to your team who you've noticed come in pretty cranky and you're guessing they're hangry? And so you decide to make breakfast a team ritual to make sure everyone has the calories and the protein they need to be creative. Like, I don't know, but play it out in that dimension and see. And then for the world, which granola are you buying? Can you manage to buy it from the farmer's market and support some local female or minority-owned business that aligns with your values? Or a Fortune 500 that's led by a predominantly female or otherwise leadership team that you want to support? Or whatever. You're buying the granola or the protein or the sausage or whatever from someone.
Right.
Buy it from someone who you align with, right? And so the MeWe world is just this lens to make visible the invisible of all of these opportunities for ripples that we have that unlock the win-win-wins of a systems approach and mean that we don't have to do more. We don't have to pile on. We don't have to motivate the team and spend quality time with the kids and eat an extra protein bar and donate to the charity. Maybe we can just have a breakfast that is quality time and models to the team and is sourced from a company that we agree with the values of. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, and thank you for sort of. I really wanted to make sure that we save time to go over that because I have numerous conversations around this. I don't think I ever did it as eloquently as you, but when I think of the me, we world, I also think about consciousness, like because you can do things because it's convenient to do it, and that's why I'm going to go and get my chicken from whatever. And I was having a conversation the other day, and I love supporting farmers markets. And it was interesting because the very first question someone always asked me, is it more expensive? That's the very, very first question that they asked. And I love cooking, and my response to that is really not much more. However, my more important answer to that is I know where it's coming from because it goes from one person to this other place, back to this person, and then it is sold to me. And I know where it's being raised. I know how these animals or fish or whatever, or vegetables, whatever it is. So to me, that is more exciting and health conscious and knowing, and I want to support that. I am not going to lie. It's not that I don't go to a Sam's Club or a Costco or a Central for certain things. But when it comes to value for me, when it comes to my food that I eat and where I purchase that, that is a conscious, that is never out of convenience for me. That is a conscious value on how I choose to go support where I put my money around food, for example.
Right. Well, how expensive is diabetes or cancer?
Right. Right. And that's really the thought process. So that was a very poignant, and I didn't know I was going to bring this up on the podcast today. I will not mention thinking to farmers markets and everything in between. I won't mention her by name or she'll never do my hair again. But it was really interesting. But we were having this discussion and but that's usually the first question that people say to me is, don't you find that to be more expensive? And I'm like, I mean, I guess that's really how you want to sort of define that. But I think it fits very well into your example of me,
totally.
We, and world. So those really have stuck into my head since we spoke. So I have been really looking forward to this. So what is your question for me? I don't usually really kind of think about it, but because I knew this conversation was going to be pretty deep, on just an unbelievable level, I really have no idea where your question could possibly go for me. But what do you have?
So, in thinking about you and your brilliance and your 1/8 billionth, my question is, as a strategy consultant, wisdom giver, if you were serving the prefix as an entity, how would you advise them to get rid of this kind of negative, fear-based aversion that I think they move through the world with?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've talked about this on the show before, but I actually come from a clinical psychology background. I don't usually tell a lot of people because they're like, oh, you're analyzing me. But I think it gives me such a great edge, not from a diagnosis standpoint, but for me to really understand. I have been told I'm a really good listener. And so when someone's using a word, kind of like when I asked you earlier about less, like what does that really mean? And so what I think helps from the word, and which is really how the unword effect was born, because I went through it myself, because I was using words to describe myself that people have, that, oh, I'm a PhD on this and whatever. And I remember my therapist and executive coach was like, you need to go deeper. Like, seriously, you need to go deeper. This is just masked with a bunch of stuff that's going on with you. Go deeper. And so I was using my words. I mean, I was using unapologetic. I was using unconventional. Because I felt that I was having to live such a conventional life and being, and that wasn't really me. I was apologizing, and I was looking back to what that really was meaning for me. Have that be my family, have that be just really what it was that identified for me. And so I really feel that people are fearful about something. So what is that underlining issue? So when I'm in a consulting, and especially if I'm with executives that I mainly work with, I mean, usually they'll tell me something and it sounds great. I mean, it sounds as corporate as corporate could be. And my first question is, I want to understand what that means. Like, what does that really mean? What's really behind what it is you're saying? Because I understand the goal we're trying to achieve, but I need to understand the words. And that was something new for me, because I used to not be what I would usually bring in with my clients. And I would assume that I thought that's what they meant. Okay, I understand you want to achieve this money-wise or whatever, or we're going to go into another market. And I noticed I was doing very kind of surface sort of work and not really understanding what that was meaning. So I think that's really how the unword effect, and I've only been incorporating this into my practice really for probably the last 5 years. But I have found it because I've gone through it and gotten and identified my fears and what my really was about, which I think I've been able to model a lot of that with my clients today. And helping them really identify what their words are. Like, for example, we've used imposter syndrome. And I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, we have these words that I think have made us comfortable to say it. Like, I'm going through imposter syndrome. Okay, great. Thank you for telling me. But what was it that made you think of that word to describe where you are? And then let's go deeper about what that really means. And is that word really the right word? Meaning in talking about what your feelings are. And then let's talk about how we can move forward to, whatever we're here to consult on or coach on. Yeah. And I really feel that is kind of where the has been, it was something really with the you took it to such a magnificent way. And a lot of my leaders have done the same. But I thought it would be something really kitschy that people would be like, what? What did we really? But then it's almost really helped them understand where they've been, where they have gone through with their journey, and where they are today. And I think it's been a very impactful way for people to really talk about what it is around their fear, as you were just mentioning, and how we can sort of put true meaning to what it is we're trying to say, so we can actually take ourselves, very much like your process with subtraction. What is it? Like, what does that, because subtraction for me and what those components are can mean very differently between you and I. Yeah. But going through the process of it could have a very similar experience. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Totally. And just the follow-up is like, because of that connection that came up, which I didn't even know when I was thinking about what I wanted to ask you, but even more now, as if I'm the subtraction activist, you're the unactivist. How do we popularize and normalize? Because again, the research has been done. People miss subtraction as an option. People miss I'm sure, as an option, as a way. That's why you have the success you do, because it's this fresh frame. So how do we help it to take over the world?
Yes. And I think that's going to be our part 2. Yeah. Because I think that I didn't really realize until you and I spoke how interesting that those connections. So, at first I was thinking, wow, this would be really great. Something new, fresh, kind of like you said, people are like, oh, I want to be a part of this. And not really realizing underneath where your subtraction, that is a very deep, for people to really look at their lives and how they're really in control more of it than we tend to think we are. And I think that's where your subtraction is methodology is helping people with their awareness and bringing it to the conscious level. And I feel that's where the unword effect does the same thing. And that's why I even said to you, okay, these may be your 3 words, but there's something happening subconsciously, where by the time we come and record the podcast, you could be like, oh, I totally had this awakening, and actually I may want to change a few of them. And I think that's what your process has a beautiful way of doing as well.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
Nell, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy, an enlightened conversation, and really a huge thank you for sharing your methodology, your journey. And to all of you, my listeners and viewers, I'm telling you, today is the day that you can begin to use subtraction in your life. And please, to all of you, don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you hear your podcasts. Nell, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you, Alison. So much fun. So juicy.